Don't forget to subscribe to Basement Tales. Just go on Apple, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts and hit that subscribe button. We release a podcast every Thursday. That way you'll be sure not to miss an episode. Welcome to Basement Tales with Sam Jackman, Charlie Einsman, Ed Grass, and Sandra Delancey. We have fun telling crazy but true stories about turning the worst possible property disasters into bags of money. Along the way, we'll pass along some important lessons to help you make cash on real estate. Sam and Charlie walked away from cubicle hell 25 years ago. Starting with no property, they created their own Clear Sky group of companies, sold hundreds of houses, bought dozens of rentals, and made millions in hard money loans. I'm Ed, a big firm litigator until muscular dystrophy made me find a hobby other than suing people. I miss it. Sandra's the normal person here with a real job plus some rentals. Her decades of friendship with the group, from office flunkies to property gurus, might help keep us all humble and focused on learning something. I wouldn't count on it.
And we have a couple of things that are topical. So one, I'm just going to say is unspeakable. So we're going to have to move on until we find a way to speak of it in a way that could be on air. And the other one,
wait a second,
part two
that.
of the Bankruptcy Boogie. Part two of the Bankruptcy Boogie. And it involves changing chapters. That's what it is. It's changing chapters. Before we get going, though, Sandra's going to bring to us a question, I think.
Welcome back.
Yes. Thank you, guys. I wish I was somewhere fun and nice and all that, but I wasn't really.
Looks like you're somewhere fun. You got a halo over your head.
Yeah, that's
see the halo
window behind me. I did not go to heaven, not yet.
Would you rather be where I am?
I don't know. I am where you are.
He's with the sharks.
Aren't you guys the sharks? All right. Here's a question from Basement Tales mailbox. If I mow a portion of my next door neighbor's lawn for use, or use a portion of his property for a couple of years, and he knows I'm mowing his lawn, but he never complains or never compensates me, can I then assume or add his property to mine? I live in Virginia. Like, this is a good one.
Yeah, well,
first of all, lawn, can I take over their property?
I mean, all of us have a different take on it. Why don't we do?
You got to do your disclaimer.
Come on, Ed.
Okay, all right. I am a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. This is an educational discussion for the purposes of learning about the law. Do not sue me for malpractice. Sue Sam for malpractice. How's that sound? Is that a good disclaimer? Okay.
And we're going to go ahead and serve. We're going to serve Sam at Sam's house so Laura picks up.
Oh, that's another Basement Tales. Actually, we got to get into that one. But all right, why don't we hear what Sam, what a broker thinks about this? Because I can show you all the ways he's wrong later. But go ahead, Sam.
Okay. So we have had direct experience with several people who have made claims similar to this. Ed's going to be the most knowledgeable on just I'm just going to describe a couple scenarios to you. Things like this come up in real estate. You could own a house with an easement, and you could have rights to maintain the easement. And the easement could start presenting a risk to your neighbor who owns the very things on the easement. They could demand that you fix them. And then it gets into this gray area. And then they start wondering if they're using your space, and a lot of different stuff like that comes up.
Could this be the dick tree?
Yeah, that's the story of the dick tree, which actually I know all too well.
And let me set up to make sure everybody understands an easement, right? In your particular case, and then we'll go back to it, is to get to Sam's property, you have to drive up a certain little bit of land, which is not Sam's. And these are actually, you can have easement by, prescription or legally. Anyway, when the property was set up, it was granted that you could drive over part of property A to get to Sam's property, and that's the easement that he's.
And I'm entitled to maintain that easement.
Right, property is owned by somebody else.
So the tenant of the person who actually owns the property contacted me. Says, "Hey, there's a risk to my house and my safety by a tree that you're maintaining on our easement."
or not maintaining because
We're
it
not
was
maintaining. So I
what
said,
was it, termited or something?
okay, let's
It
just split it. Yeah, let's just split the
But
cost.
it was a dead tree, right? Was it a dead tree? Is that what it was?
It was heading in that direction.
Oh,
The
okay.
tree needed to come down. In the
Okay.
scenario, the tree needed to come down for safety. That was a fair issue. The question it was, who pays for it? Sam uses this easement to drive through, but does the other guy, owner
tree.
A, it's his tree. He actually, he could even take the tree down when it was healthy.
Sure.
Okay.
All Sam's right was to use the easement
And maintain it. Yeah.
and maintain it.
But I'm not required.
So wait a minute. Well, wait a minute. What?
I'm not required to maintain it.
Oh,
I
you're
have the
not
right
required
to maintain it.
You just have a right to the land, but you don't have to maintain what's on that land.
I don't have to.
I thought in your case no, I guess you didn't have to maintain it, but there's some question in Virginia law is if you have an easement like that, say for example a tree fell across and blocked the way to your house, and in order to use the easement you'd have to clear the tree. But let's say you wanted to make that would be maintenance. But to make it prettier, that you couldn't do that. You wouldn't have a right to change how it
My
looks
easement says I have a right to make it pretty.
Oh, okay. Okay, and this is the
okay.
issue, is these can vary quite a bit.
They vary a lot.
Agreement. Yeah.
And so a neighborly resolution would be, you just split the cost, and it's
So
resolved.
you have the right to use the easement. but
And
you don't
maintain
have to
it if I
maintain.
want to.
You have the right to, but you don't have to maintain the easement
Right.
because you don't own the easement. You
Right.
just have a right to use the easement.
Right.
But
Got
the
it.
And then how much was the cost?
$3,000.
Okay.
The
approximately.
big tree.
It's a big tree.
Take down a tree. Okay.
Take down a
got it.
big tree, haul it away.
But back to, so if the tree fell over and you were no longer able to, get, through to your property and it fell into the easement, who
That'd
has
be all
the,
right. I can maintain that. It would
Yeah,
be
but-
no problem.
Yeah, but
But
the
the
issue
bigger
was,
question is, what if
the
the
issue was
tree
falling on the
falls
house. Yeah.
on the neighbor's house? Now they've notified me and I have the right to maintain it. Are they going to be able to convert that into some obligation that I've caused an injury by not maintaining it? So I said, we'll just split it. But the neighbor wouldn't split it. So I had the tree cut so it looks like a big dick, just to where it won't fall on his house, but the whole top of the tree is gone.
If you were less crass, you could say it looks like a middle finger.
okay. I
So
like
then-
that better.
The
Well,
lines of my fence weren't just right, and
Right,
I got a
because the
little
middle-
concerned that there would be a claim that he was maintaining in some way, just like your listener, maintaining my property in some way. So I pulled up all the old fence, and I had a new survey done, and I ran the fence exactly, 2 inches inside the survey line. So there's no disputes anymore.
well, the
The tree
problem
stands, the fence is corrected, nothing.
but the problem is, it's a circumcised middle finger.
Oh.
Sam considered but did not hire like one of those chainsaw sculptors, chainsaw wood sculptor the top of the tree.
That's what he
That
should have
would-
done.
Yeah, that
that's
would I
so-
guess you still could, right? You still could, you could make that tree look nice.
It could be beautiful. But in any case, there was a related fence issue, and it's the same issue your questioner is asking.
Uh-huh,
Yeah, but I think the
And I fixed
question,
my fence because
Well,
I didn't
no.
want to have any claims,
the question was more, I think, around an adverse possession issue, wasn't it?
which we have
Right.
going on
The
right now.
easement is
Even
one thing, but now we've got adverse possession sort of.
Charlie can tell you the adverse possession story we have going on now.
Is this really adverse possession? I mean,
That's what
the
they're
guy just
claiming.
said that he's been
No.
he's been mowing the lawn.
Well, no.
And
Two
did he
things.
want to get paid for mowing the lawn? What was
No.
it again
He
exactly?
wants the
said two
land
things.
by
He
cutting
wants
the
the
grass.
land
Yeah.
because it's kind of like that squatter's right thing that those of
Yeah.
us who don't know anything about real estate think that if we can squat for long enough on somebody's property, we can take over ownership of it. It belongs to us, right?
Yeah.
That's what
Right.
we're thinking. So
Yeah.
if I
Well, he's-
maintain that lawn long enough,
Well,
It's
he
like I'm squatting
specifically
on
said he mows the yard and he's using that part of the land. So I don't know what that means, right? Isn't adverse possession 7 years?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
So let's turn it into sort of lawyerese, like you're in law school, and I just heard the sound of all the podcasts going click, but it's simple and very interesting. So you have property A and property B, and there's a property line. There's a legal property line between them. And so, all right, it's pretty obvious. A can use A's property and B can use B's property. But here we're saying that the fence line of B's property is, let's say it's 20 feet back. And so A, you know who goes and looks at the deed exactly, right? A just starts mowing and maintaining that extra 20 foot that looks like A's property, but is really on B's property. And he mows it and maintains it, and he says, there's a dick tree there. I don't like it. I'm going to cut it down. It cost $3,000. He cuts down the tree and doesn't even ask, B about that. And in this situation, there's, lawn mowing. It's the same point. Maybe there's a fence in this person's example. Maybe there isn't, right? So the general concept of adverse possession is, and the fence is a factual issue, is if A is using that strip of land to mow and to maintain and whatever, and does that for 15 years, there might be adverse possession. Might be, and we'll get to why. So it's a 15-year period in Virginia, and it varies quite a lot by states. Virginia's kind of on the higher side. So let's say B goes to sell the property 16 years into this process, and he goes, hey, that's an extra 20 foot of my property. And he, just like Sam does, he picks up his fence and moves it out 20 foot. And A says, what are you doing? For 16 years, I've been mowing that lawn, and I put up a nice tree, and I took down a dick tree, and all that cost me money. That's my land. And now you get into a factual dispute. And I'll give you basically the elements under Virginia law to have adverse possession is it has to be a hostile act to take over the land. And it has to be open and notorious, and you have to assert exclusive control to the property for that 15-year period. Okay, now hostility doesn't mean like you take your shotgun out and point it at B for 15 years, and every 6 months you look at him and say, don't forget, you come on that 20-foot strip of land, I'm going to shoot you. It's simply, the hostility is a little bit of a misnomer. It means without permission, essentially. So if A ever said to B, if they said, hey, we all know that 20-foot strip of land is B's, but I don't really see that part of my property. I don't really care, but it really matters how your property A looks. You can maintain it. I give you permission to make it pretty, to mow the lawn, to put up whatever trees you want, but don't forget, it's still my property. That there is no adverse possession, because it wasn't adverse, right? It was like they were saying that you could borrow it. There's no legal change. But if A just starts doing it and doesn't get permission from B, that's the sort of open and notorious and hostile. And also that they're exclusively using the property. And so a fence is a great evidence of that adverse possession, right? If it's just two grassy lawns coming together, and it's one person's mowing one part and one person's mowing the other part, and they've just made a mistake about where it ends, with your typical, it's going to probably be hard to show adverse possession there. You haven't really done very much to use it. It's not clear exactly. So if you had to go to court, you'd say, okay, well, where did you stop mowing? Maybe you could say from that rock to that rock was what my area of mowing, and we never had any discussion about it. I just did it. My neighbor Tom, Mr. B, saw me doing it every day. He didn't say knock it off. He didn't say don't forget that's my property. So it gets to be very fact-based. I sort of gave you the elements. And so in Sam's situation, he was smart to move his fence, because that fence line, Sam may have bought the property with it there, maybe he didn't. And it's the history of it's unclear. Well, you just leave it sit there without doing anything, you can lose that right to the land. And then what would happen in that scenario is, for some reason, that fence line comes up. Actually, well, let's say Sam picked up his fence and moved it 20 feet to the actual property line. The other property owner goes, hey, get your fence off my lawn. What are you doing? And Sam says, well, hey, look at my deed right here. It's really my property. And the guy goes, oh, well, maybe under the deed, but for 20 years I've been mowing that lawn and putting trees up, and that fence line shows that you weren't asserting any control over the land. Then you have a better chance if there's a court fight. And what you do is one person could sue the other for trespass, right? So Sam could, if the neighbor ripped his fence off, he could say, you broke down my fence and I want money to replace my fence. And the other side could say, no, I want the court to make it clear that it's my property now. And that's the adverse possession case, often brought as a defense to a trespass action. Okay. So class is dismissed. Let me see. Did that make sense? Did I make it even more confusing, or does
15
that seem
years
fairly reasonable?
and clear use, not just cutting some grass for 5 years. That's not going to do it.
So it's
Right.
15 years. So it is 15.
It is, and
I don't even think it was 5 years, Sam. He said 2 years, or this person. I don't even know if it's she, but they said 2 years. They've been cutting the grass. So
All right. So
right.
the answer is
So
no.
two. Well, but let me tell you, there's always an exception. There's in something in Virginia. There's a tacking concept. Okay, so let's say this person moved in, and the prior owner said, here's the boundary of where you cut your lawn, and this is the land I'm selling you. So the person moves in, they do it for 2 years, and the property owner B says, get off my property after 2 years. Well, so you would think there's no possible adverse possession case there. It's only been 2 years. Well, what did the prior owner do? Maybe the prior owner mowed that same bit of land for the prior 20 years. And so you can actually, in some cases, tack on the prior owner's adverse possession to yours. So instead of it being 2 years of having mowed the lawn, it's 22 years. And now you're way above the adverse possession. But you'd have to go back, or you'd want, if possible, to go back and go to the original person again and say, oh yeah, I mowed that land for 20 years. I never asked for possession. There you go. You've got your adverse possession case. But I don't like the case because there's no fence, or, it's all fact specific. Maybe the way the land looks, it's sort of obvious without a fence. So this is why, again, sometimes you need a lawyer for these things as opposed to just the general principle. So anyway, that's just a potential exception. In the facts that you described, there was no mention of a prior person doing that. So then you're sort of out of luck on the adverse possession claim.
There you go.
Yeah. So sometimes you get a dictory, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
please don't make that the title of this basement tale. I do not want to see that. Maybe middle finger, maybe.
Yeah, that might sell. That might sell.
Well, you know what the title is? Yeah, she's talking to Charlie, my son. I think the title should be Sandra doesn't want the title to be Dictory. and use that.
Yes, that's a good caveat. Oh Sandra did not want this. I do not approve of this.
Yeah. Why didn't you? It could have been middle finger tree, Sam. Are brokers like lawyers? Are they down low, dirty people?
Some people think so.
Like it. These two guys, maybe.
Oh man!
All right. So
sad.
we have a little bit of a bankruptcy boogie story to tell. We've got a borrower who's trying to escape paying their bills.
Yeah.
Charlie, how's that work?
Yep. So, you guys remember? Heck, this was probably 4 or 5 months ago when we did the classic bankruptcy boogie story about the property on Cameron News in Alexandria, city of Alexandria, and how
the meat was on the grill.
Remember, the meat was on the grill. The husband and wife were taking turns. Their house would go to foreclosure, and then the
Yep.
husband would file bankruptcy. They would dismiss the case because they wouldn't file the paperwork, and then 9 months later it would come up for foreclosure. The wife would file a bankruptcy to ward off the foreclosure, and they did this for a period of 7 or 8 years. You guys remember that story? And so these guys did this for 7 or 8 years by alternating husband, wife, husband, wife, husband, wife. Well, in this case, we had lunch with one of our competitor hard money lenders, and he does loans in Virginia, D.C., but this loan was in Charlottesville, Virginia. And so he was all aggravated at lunch because we asked him, we said, hey, how is your portfolio going? And so he had a couple of bad loans down in Charlottesville, Virginia. He goes, yeah, well, this one guy really irritated me, and he's still irritating me. He goes, I go to foreclose on him, and the guy files all different types of bankruptcy. Evidently he had a loan to an LLC, but then he took on a personal guarantee. Well, the first time he went up for foreclosure, the guy filed a Chapter 13. And so a Chapter 13 is an individual reorganization under the Bankruptcy Code. And so the substitute trustee who was supposed to sell the house canceled the auction. Okay. Another 6 months went by. So the guy never filed his Chapter 13 personal bankruptcy paperwork. So the bankruptcy was dismissed. So he could file again. Well, the lender, our friend, filed another foreclosure on him 6 months later. And what did the guy do? He filed a Chapter 11 bankruptcy because this time it was under the LLC that the property was titled under. Okay, same kind of thing happened. He files a Chapter 11, which is a corporate reorganization, right? And then that case gets dismissed because he didn't file his paperwork. Okay, house doesn't go to foreclosure. Another 6 months goes by. He goes to foreclose again. Well, this wily guy then files a Chapter 7 bankruptcy to stop the foreclosure. And so again, he didn't file his paperwork. That gets dismissed. So stay tuned. So this guy is using the Chapter 13, the Chapter 11, and the Chapter 7 to avoid being foreclosed on. And needless to say, our lender friend is absolutely outraged.
Every trick in the book.
There you go.
That's pretty good. I haven't seen that one or heard of that one before. And just to clarify, Chapter 7 is basically a bankruptcy to liquidate your personal assets, typically, that, there's no way I can reorganize. I need to wipe out, and start over completely. Chapter 13 is, as Charlie said, a reorganization. Well, I've kind of in over my head, but if I spread out the payments and get a little relief, or maybe I can pay 70% of my debt over a 5-year period, or 100% over a 5-year period. And again, that's a personal bankruptcy. And as Charlie said, Chapter 11 typically is a business bankruptcy. And that's a pretty neat trick. There is a provision in bankruptcy law about abusing the bankruptcy system, right? So that's the other part about this is your friend with the right lawyer. Now it's interesting.
Which oh, by the way, he does not have, because he wants to pay the $299 lawyer.
Right.
So he does not have the right lawyer. We already know this. And he's too scared to venture into bankruptcy court.
Right. Well, it's hard to do bankruptcy court. So he's in the lingo. He's the creditor as the lender, and it's relatively easy to file your claim in bankruptcy court. But here it wouldn't matter because they keep getting dismissed. So the only way he can sort of force the hand of this person is, you could keep trying to foreclose on the property and keep having this happen. But the problem is the bankruptcy court's probably not going to notice that quickly.
That's right.
So you have to actually have a lawyer come in and file a motion and say, hey, judge, this person is abusing the bankruptcy system. They're not liquidating their assets. They're not reorganizing. They're not getting their business back. And they're purely doing this to delay. And it's costing me money. And then you can get a judge to look at it, even in a case that normally would be dismissed. And the judge can enter an order saying you can't file bankruptcy for the next 180 days.
Yeah, but remember though, it was a personal entity, personal. In other words, the entity and the person were two different people. So unless he hired a lawyer, they're not going to catch that, right? Personal entity, personal, or it might have been personal entity, entity. I'm not exactly sure how it went, but it was definitely two different names.
Yeah, well,
Right.
it's, and I have to think back at the abuse, like for example, where you typically see it, like you talked about the original Bankruptcy Boogie, where it's a husband and wife.
Right.
So a husband and wife are filing a 13 and a 7. It's personal, and the rules, as I recall, I'd have to look, but the rules about the abuse, I think, tends to relate to the personal bankruptcy. And there are rules about, okay, if this is your first bankruptcy, if this is your second bankruptcy, if this is your third bankruptcy,
Third.
then typically it's pretty much automatically assumed it's abusive and the court's not going to allow it. But still, you may have to bring a motion or whatever to stop that. It can get complicated because then they can go in with the Bankruptcy Boogie and say, this is only my second bankruptcy. But what about your wife's bankruptcy? So there is a way you can go to the court and say, look, we all know what's going on here, that they're combining to do this. So enter an order based on what you're seeing, even if the general rule is whatever, 3 bankruptcies. Here, this is a plan, like our last step, a scam, a scheme, or a plot. This is a scheme to scheme the system by manipulating the business and and you might get a judge to say, yeah, no, that's it. I'm going to enter an order not letting either entity. But in the personal bankruptcy, you might have to sue the LLC, and oh my goodness, it gets complicated. I'm not even sure how you do that inexpensively, even if you have the best bankruptcy lawyer or quickly, right? Because so what's going on with this person's property? They're obviously not getting, the lender is not getting interest payments, right?
Yeah, it's just sitting there because the guy obviously isn't going to make money on it. He must have overbought it, and the lender must have overlent. I don't know what the right word is. Overlent. What's the right word? He just
overleveraged it.
Or undersecured, I think, is the bankruptcy term. There's even a thing oversecured, right? That you're in good shape or bad shape. But yeah, that's a tough. So why do you think? I mean, I guess why? I mean, who knows? Why is the buyer or the guy who is doing the flip? Why is he doing this?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. And just knowing who our lender friend is, odds are he didn't do the appropriate due diligence to drive by the property, look at it, and look and see how much work was really needed to be done. I think he just did a armchair loan on it, relying on a source, right? A bird dog or a broker, because a loan broker brought it to him, and so he trusted the loan broker's opinion without him, actually driving down there and looking at it himself. So he just did I call it an armchair loan without even going down there and looking at it himself.
Right. Well, that's why you want to have on a say a 70% leverage. If 30% of the value, the lender, I'm not explaining this well, but if you have time to deal with this, let's say the property's $500,000, there's a $400,000 loan, you can fight for $100,000 worth of legal fees and get that back out of the property. But if the loan's $400,000 on a $400,000 house, then you're just losing every dollar of delay the lender's losing. Well, let me ask you guys, what would you do, or Sandra as well? So the legal system can only do so much, and people can manipulate it and whatever. What's a short circuit that you could try to do to work something out with this borrower? Because what's their end game?
So the borrower has no money in the end. So that you have an honest and open discussion with them about, in the end, they're not going to have anything here. Why hold all this up? And maybe you'd like to take some of the money I would have otherwise paid to an attorney and just give me the deed to the property, and we'll just call it a day. Right there.
Wait a second. That's an outrage. You're saying your plan is to save money by not paying a lawyer?
Yeah. Short circuit the attorney.
Right. And the system, really, right? So it's not even just the attorney, it's the time.
Yeah. Well, you can do that. But see, the problem, though, is that the title has got to be clean after you, right? So you as the lender, I'm assuming, like in this case,
if you're in the first position.
Yeah, he's in first position. But if this guy loaded up a second or a third trust on top of you, or if he has HOA liens because he's not paying his HOA, then that methodology sometimes doesn't work. You got to take them all the way to the mat.
Can you do a deed in lieu of foreclosure if there's liens above?
You can, but
only with permission.
Yeah, you owe them. What do you mean with permission, though? But you owe them, right?
Correct. You have to have permission of the.
Well, to end it completely. But let's say the borrower is like, I give up. So you say, I'll give you $5,000. So the first trust lender says, your friend Charlie says, I'll give you $5,000 to end all this. And the guy thinks, well, that's $5,000 more than I would have otherwise, so I'll take it. And you can have a deed in lieu of foreclosure. I'll just give you the property, but the property still has a second and third trust on it. Can you extinguish? That. You owe them, right? Unless you've gone through the foreclosure process.
Right. Yeah. And so, or they'll just let it go. Well, so that's release.
So there, instead of the deed in lieu of foreclosure, you could say, I'll give you $5,000 not to oppose or file bankruptcy. I'll give you $5,000 if you promise not to file for bankruptcy and stop the foreclosure. Is that acceptable?
You could do that.
You can do that.
Mm-hmm. You could also pay a partial on the second. You could pay them, say, look, you were going to get $200,000, we'll give you $100,000.
Mm-hmm. Right, or they would be wiped out otherwise, right, or maybe
at foreclosure they're at risk of being wiped out.
Yeah,
depending on the equity.
Yeah, we just recently did that on a property in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, where, this loan hadn't been paid for what, Sam, 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah,
they didn't pay us for at least 2.5 years, and we did a DIL, which is deed in lieu of foreclosure, and we actually, believe it or not, the guy owed us, I don't know, $75,000 in interest. But we actually paid him $5,000 to give us a DIL.
Yeah.
And just paid him to go away, and he just signed the house over to us.
Yeah, and has tenants in it. So we got his house with tenants.
It took us 2.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. He just threw his hands up after a while. He was going to fight us in court and whatnot. But
yeah, that was a potential Maryland bankruptcy boogie,
But he gave up on his attorney, paying his attorney.
That would take us 3
But you're
years.
out of $75,000, but now you own the home. With tenants in it.
We're not technically we're out of $75,000 from him paying us, but the loan amount was something like, I don't know, $275,000, and the house is only worth $625. So certainly don't cry over spilt milk for us, right? So even though we didn't get that money in interest payments like we were supposed to, we're certainly going to get an equity in the house, and the house needs maybe $100,000 of work. So we do have plenty of equity in there, so it's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
And that's the key as a hard money lender, to make sure that there's enough equity in there. And that's why banks have all the lending standards with banks. Their betting is a bad word, but maybe an accurate word. When a regular bank gives a loan to a home purchaser, they're betting on the person, not just on the being enough equity, but enough that they're a good credit risk. They're not going to want to declare bankruptcy. The other thing is inversely enough, a homeowner's property gets less protection typically in bankruptcy than a business property, because the idea is that home loans are at an low interest rate, and so the courts are less likely to let them reorganize or whatever. And that gets fairly detailed. But the point is, bankruptcy is not ultimately going to help a homeowner all that much either. So
yeah, all it's doing is pushing off the inevitable, right?
Right. Well, and when I say not helping them, it may help them. The bankruptcy may be very good, but help them save the house. You're going to be hard pressed to say, well, cancel all of my debt and let me keep the house. But their provision anyway, they get a lawyer for that if you have a concern about your own house, or the rules are quite arcane. And in fact, what's fascinating, generally speaking, when you're a lawyer, you can do lawyer stuff. Well, in bankruptcy, it's so arcane that you have to be admitted to the court specifically as a bankruptcy attorney. So Joe Blow, a lawyer, can't just show up in bankruptcy court. They can show up in any court in Virginia, but not bankruptcy court. There's a special bar for that, essentially. So, and that shows you how, the courts are like, good Lord, you got to know what you're doing to be in bankruptcy court. Don't waste our time if you don't get all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Wow, I feel bad for your friend. That's not good.
Yeah. he's not too happy, to say
Yeah.
the least.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm happy
well, that
for
was
my
good.
lawyer brethren.
This was good. We covered a lot of
This was a good
stuff.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the listener who sent in the question. I mean, that was really nice.
So send more questions to yourstory@basementtales.com. Like us and subscribe.
That way you won't miss the thing that Sam opened up with, which now I want to know about, but that'll be on a future episode. So make sure you hit subscribe.
Yeah, it's horrors. That's a house full of horrors.